The one-year anniversary of the marathon bombings approaches. We're hearing a lot about lessons learned. A number of reports have come out recently. There's, of course, high praise for law enforcement, but there's also some criticism. The House Homeland Security Committee issued one of the toughest assessments, pointing to a lack of information sharing and raising the question, could the bombings have been prevented? The 2014 Boston Marathon is just about here. Time to run, time to reflect on what happened last year. There's no denying local, state, and federal law enforcement won over the nation with the capture of bombing suspect Jahar Tsarnaev in Watertown 4 days after the bombings. But 1 year later, there are questions.
You know, with the 9/11 report that came out about 10 years ago, they pointed to deficiencies in information sharing among law enforcement authorities at that time. Yet, when we had the hearings in the aftermath of the marathon bombing, they told us that we still have these gaps. So what occurred in the last 10 years cannot occur again going forward.
Congressman Bill Keating sits on the House Homeland Security Committee, which issued this report last month. The Road to Boston, Counterterrorism Challenges and Lessons from the Marathon Bombings. It points to a warning from Russia to the FBI in 2011 about bombing suspect Tamerlan Tsarnaev, in which the Russian government expressed concern that he had become radicalized and that he might return to Russia and join extremist groups there. In response, the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force in Boston conducted an assessment which included interviewing Tamerlan and his parents. The FBI did not find any evidence of terrorist activity, and the Boston JTTF officially closed their assessment on June 24, 2011. The Boston JTTF is made up of members from various law enforcement agencies, including representatives from Boston Police. But former Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis says he was never aware of the FBI investigation of Tamerlan Tsarnaev until after the bombings. Davis testified on Wednesday before the committee, saying all agencies should be working together, like they do in other countries like the United Kingdom.
Let me just ask you, wasn't that the original purpose of the JTTF?
Yes, and I think that the FBI came 90 yards down the field by establishing the JTTFs. But I think that there was some bureaucracy that prevented it to go over the goal line.
The report from Congressman Keating's committee points out JTTF members can only share information with their parent agencies with FBI approval, and recommended finding ways to increase and enhance the information sharing. The FBI has refused to appear before the committee, but we caught up with Kieran Ramsey, an assistant special agent in charge for the FBI in Boston.
Obviously, all of these public safety agencies are taking every precaution necessary should a threat pop up, and certainly the communication here has been second to none.
Ramsey and representatives from local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies embracing a spirit of cooperation last month while gathering at the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency headquarters, talking about increased security for this year's marathon. We asked Ramsey about Davis's concerns about not knowing about the warning from Russia regarding Tamerlan Tsarnaev. Are the lines of communication open more now than they were a year ago?
I don't want to characterize what he said then. All I can tell you is, as was the case then, as is the case today, the JTTF is an unfettered information sharing organization. There is absolute constant communication going on, not only between all these agencies here, but all the other agencies that represent the JTTF, for the very reason of we are in the business to prevent these threats from occurring.
The fact that Tamerlan was on the FBI's radar, do you have any regrets?
I'm not going to answer that question other than to say the investigation of what happened is still ongoing. There's a pending prosecution. Our mission now, as supporting all of these municipalities and towns, is to make sure that this is a safe event.
State Police Colonel Tim Albin echoed Ramsey's conclusions about cooperation between agencies. Are you convinced that agencies, federal, local, state, are sharing all the information?
Well, Mike, I was convinced of it last year, and I said that publicly, and I'll repeat it. You know, I never saw an information embargo in any way, shape, or form.
Frankly, it's just not true that the information's being shared.
Congressman Keating stands by his committee's investigation and its report.
Do you think these marathon bombings could have been prevented if more information sharing was going on?
We'll never know the answer to that with any certainty. However, we do know this, and the report highlights it. There were 4, maybe 5 red flags. Each one of those could have been very impactful that were missed, and they were missed for different reasons.
You can read the committee's full report on our website, myfoxboston.com. As we mentioned, there are a lot of reports coming out about the marathon bombings. A report by federal inspectors general out last week also critical of the FBI and its handling of the Russian warning about Tamerlan Tsarnaev. It's now recommending that the FBI consider sharing threat assessment information with state and local authorities more proactively.